Shalom Aleichem, welcome to Tanya Outside In, Perek Ches. Okay, this is the scary chapter. Okay, the Rebbe, at the end of the Sefer, the Rebbe goes through 10 prokim he goes through all of the concept of Yiras Hashem and Avos Hashem. And he talks about all the different kinds of Yira, all the different kinds of Ava. He does not mention Yiras Oynesh once. Not once. Yiras Oynesh, in the eyes of the Tanya, and in my mind as well, makes sense, is not a Yiras Hashem. It's a Yiras Oynesh. It's a fear of pain. And that is not what it means, Yiras Shamayim. Yiras Shamayim, for example, if you knew that God was watching you, why would you need to be scared that he was going to punish you? Isn't that just enough that you're aware that he's watching you? There's an eye that sees, an ear that hears, etc. That's Yiras Shamayim. Now, dependent on the madrega of how real he is to you, that's levels of Yiras Shamayim. Yiras Oynesh, according to the Tanya, according to the Tanya, is not Yiras Hashem. And I could give you svaras. I mean, I'll say it. I'll say it out. This is a machlokes, okay? And some people hold that Yiras Shamayim, Yiras Oynesh is a prerequisite to Yiras Hashem, and some people hold that it isn't. The Ramchal very clearly holds that Yiras Oynesh is the first madrega, and then you get to Yiras Hashem. Okay, according to my understanding of the Tanya does not hold like that, and I'll give you my svara as to why that is. Yiras Oynesh does not necessarily lead to Yiras Hashem. In fact, it could lead to the opposite. Yiras Oynesh, again, this is a svara. This isn't MS. I'm giving you a svara. Yeah, that Yiras Oynesh. What's the center of your universe when you're scared of punishment? Who's the center of your universe? You or God?
Yourself.
Exactly. That's not a good thing. The more you put yourself in the center of your universe, so the more you become a manda amma, the more you become part of the equation. And the whole point of Avodas Hashem is that you're not part of the equation. The Ribbono Shel Olam is the equation, and you have to work out how you fit into that. How can I serve? Not how can you serve me? Not I'm the center of the universe. And that it's very difficult to get out of that mindset. You know, God is there to, you know, to give me everything that I'm davening for. He's there to make sure that I feel that I have meaning in my life. He's there so that I can have a feeling of closeness and connection and all these things. Okay, that God isn't the center of your universe if that's how it is. All of those things are very secondary. The question is, how can I serve you? Not how can you serve me? And we're not even talking about Gan Eden and Gehenna. We're talking about even much more kind of sophisticated, nuanced, subtle ideas. But the Rebbe very clearly, now we're not saying there isn't such a thing as Schar and Oynesh, Chaz v'Shalom. That is one of the Yud Gimel Ikarim, although saying that is quite low down on the list, to be honest. But there's a Vadai Schar and Oynesh. And if you just want to have a svara for that in reality, I mean, look at how the world works. A person smokes cigarettes, yeah, there's an oynesh, good chance of getting lung cancer. A person eats like a behemoth gasser, there's a good chance of getting heart disease. Yeah, a person dedicates time to learning Torah, it's a good chance he'll become an elevated mensch. A person invests time in working out, he'll feel good and he'll have a nice looking body, etc. So you see that the Ribbono Shel Olam is a fan of Schar and Oynesh. The world works in that way. But in regards to meditating on the Oinshim that will take place. Yeah, I don't know if there's any benefit to that, especially in our generation. The more people, I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and I've yet to come across somebody who actually even, I mean, I suppose people say they believe in Gehenna. but it doesn't make a difference to nearly anyone. And hence what you wrote Yisachar about this rabbi who put out, he's put out videos to really try and get the pachad of, of Gehenna into you. Well, I'll put it in different context. There's an evangelical priest in somewhere in down south who created, a wealthy guy, he created like a house of horrors, for the 9-year-olds, to put them through it, to give them a taste of hell. Yeah, they go literally, they put these 8, 9, 10-year-olds through this house of horrors, and they screw up their heads. They screw up their heads. Is that a good thing?
Every Catholic friend I've ever had has hated religion because they only grew up with like hell and brimstone, fire and
No one
damnation.
cares anymore. No one cares. I'll tell you, I mean, look, it's part of God's plan. Go back a couple of hundred years, Every major power, every powerful monarch in the world had the ability just a couple hundred years ago to point at you, and that was it. You're gone, and not even nicely. We're not talking just beheading. We're talking being dragged through the street by horses, strung, drawn, and quartered, stretched, castrated, v'chule, yeah. And in
Right,
public,
there's a bracha, there's a special bracha when you see people that have that power, right?
yeah. There is, machale. So yeah, there is something like that. A real monarch, yeah.
Mhm.
And you would see it in London town. I think it was on a Monday and a Thursday. You would go to town and you would see these insane things happening in front of your eyes. Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore. And I always think like Donald Trump when he was in power, he was like he's like an emperor style kind of. It's not like Joe Biden, who I'm not being disrespectful to the man, but he doesn't have he walks in the room. I would stand up for him, but I don't think you would automatically stand up for the man, yeah. Whereas Donald Trump is the kind of man who walk in the room, you stand up for him. He has that kind of presence to him, yeah. So in my mind, he's like emperor of the world kind of material, yeah. Listen to how the press spoke to him when he was in power. It was ridiculous. Why did God do that? Why did God remove the fear of Malchus from the world? He did, but Kavana, he took it out of the world. There's no fear of Malchus anymore. Maybe with Putin a little bit, but we don't have anything to do with him. And in Saudi Arabia, there's still a shtickle, Yiras Hashem maybe, or not Yiras Hashem, Yiras Oynesh. But in the Western world, it's, even in prison, you can order kosher food, So that's Mitzad Echad. So Hashem really removed Yiras Oynesh from the world. Yeah, it's just there's no point of reference for us as modern people. Yeah. Also, Avascha, which is the flip side of Yiras Oynesh, Avascha, also Hashem's kind of like, I mean, we're kind of bored with ourselves. But everybody knows that, the more pleasure you get, it's like enough, man. I've had enough pleasure. Just you can't fool anyone anymore with pleasure because we have so much pleasure. So Hashem has, in my opinion, has purposefully removed Yiras Oynesh and Avascha from the world. Okay, why? I mean, again, this is just my conjecture. Why? Because we are now Rui to be over the Shem Lishma for the first time in the history of humanity. We're mamash Rui to serve Hashem Lishma. We're too sophisticated to be scared by this, this, oh, it's going to be so painful, or oh, it's going to be so amazing. We need more. We need more than that. In the old days when thunder would go off in the sky, we'd think that God was angry with us. Nowadays we know how it works. Not that doesn't mean that God isn't doing it. It doesn't mean that God isn't angry with us. I mean, I don't think it does mean that he's angry with us, but we understand how it works. We need a little bit more. A sophisticated mind needs a little bit more to work with or to motivate it than a simple mind. So And the Rebbe, I think the Rebbe was miscovering to that. And I'm not saying there isn't Schon Onesh at all. Chas v'shalom. Avadai there is. And the Rebbe is going to explain that. But this isn't part of our avoider in this generation, according to the way I understand reality. Okay, there are other rabbis who don't feel that way, and gesundheit, they can feel as they wish. But from my experience and from talking to people, no one cares. It doesn't motivate anyone anymore. Anyone agrees to that? People feel that Gehenna motivates them. Gehenna doesn't motivate. All the people that I speak to, literally without exception, I've asked a lot of people this question. If I say in my house when I have Bochum around, I usually ask them out of 10, how much does Gehenna, the fear of Gehenna, motivate you from not doing Averas? And usually people answer either like 1 or 2, and like a lot of kids just giggle and say like nothing, you know. I don't even know if people believe in it anymore. Anyway, that said, the Rebbe is going to now explain what goes on in different places, and not just Gehenna. There's all these different stages. Okay. V'oid, Periches, V'oid. We're going to add on. We've been talking about the idea of basically being involved in things that are forbidden. V'oid. Zois b'maichlas asuris. What about with forbidden foods? Shlokach niklam b'shem issa. And we mentioned this last parak. This is why they're called isur, yeah, which means bound mipnei she'af. They're bound down. Why? Mipnei she'af mi she'achol maichel issa. That even someone who ate something treif, b'loy hoida, and he didn't know, l'shem shemayim, he ate it for a heavenly purpose. La'avoid Hashem b'koyach achiluhu, to serve Hashem with the energy of this food. V'gampal, and he did, v'asachen, and he actually did, v'kar v'spalo b'koyach achiluhu. He mamash learned and he davened with this energy. The chiyas that is in it does not oila umistabeshes b'teiras Torah. It does not go up and becoming clothed in the words of the Torah tefillah kamoya heta, like it does with heta, with things that are mutter. So when you eat kosher food, the energy that you use afterwards to speak words of Torah and to be involved in mitzvah activity, that energy becomes enclosed in the oisius of Torah and goes up to Shemayim. And that's called geula for that food. That chicken that you eat on Shabbos that got shechted correctly and is kosher, that is the happiest chicken in the whole world. Yeah, the energy in that chicken goes straight up to Shemayim and mamash kol b'seder. If that chicken was shechted incorrectly and became a treifa, we're eating it on Shabbos, and that's possibly the most unhappy chicken in the world. That's the most frustrated, unhappy chicken in the world, because the energy is not, that chiyas is not going back up to Hashem. It stays down in the klipas tameas, and in fact, it even draws down the nefesh bahamis of the yid into the klipas tameas. You've made not you, the person who did that made a very, very unhappy chicken. Okay? So when we eat kosher food, the energy is available to go up. Doesn't mean it goes up, because if we're not living our life in accordance to avodas Hashem, then it just stays here. But if we really fresh, like in the past of the Ben Soya Moira, then the energy goes down until we then turn ourselves around and start serving God. Then it goes back up. But with a Michael Asa, a food that's forbidden, the energy goes down and it stays down. We could then turn around and start serving God with that energy. That energy does not go back up to the Ribbono Shel Olam. And we said, how does it get fixed? With different levels of tshuva, but not just a stum tshuva. It needs a more intense kind of tshuva. Why doesn't it go up? Because it is bound up in the hands of the Sitra Achor. Meshlois klipas tameas, in the 3 unholy klipas. Even if it's an Issa D'Rabbanan, that in a certain way, the words of Chazal are more chomer, more stringent, more important in a sense than the words of Torah. And that if you want to get into that, you need to go and get involved in the halachas. But it's just, I think, Minister, I'm just trying to give us some chizuk to say that just because something's an Issa D'Rabbanan doesn't give you any kind of leeway It's largely irrelevant to us whether something's an issa d'rabbanan, issa d'oraisa, until it comes down to like emergency situations. But otherwise, if it's asa, it's asa. Okay. L'chein. Gam ha'yetzer hara v'koyach misav l'devarim asurim. Now, what about the yetzer hara for things that are forbidden? So we've got Minastam, we've got two kinds of yetzer haras, and again, there's gradations in the middle. But the two kind of yetzer haras that we have are to indulge in the permissible, and then there are things that are forbidden that we have a yetzer hara for. They're coming from two very different places. He explains it here again in like a couple of words, and we could talk about this for a long time. So the koyach hataiva l'devarim ha'asurim, the koyach for desiring things that are forbidden, who shindalad mishindalad in nechuroyim. It comes from the shindalad. I always learn to not pronounce that word. That happens actually to be my initials, unfortunately. But shindalad in nechuroyim means the goyesha shindaladim. Okay, shindalad is translated as demon, whatever that means. It's some kind of spiritual negativity that has a very definite form. Shu yetzer hara she'umois oid de gululim, which is the yetzer hara of the nations. That their nefesh comes from the shlosh klipas tameis, from that totally impure, that totally dark klipa. That's not the case for the yetzer hara that comes to fulfill our tivers for things that are mutter. Yeah, just to fill our tiver. This is the parsha of this. Yeah, the Ben Soyamor, who shindalad mishindalad in Yehudoyim. That's called the shindalad in Yehudoyim, the Jewish demons. Because that's able to come back to Kedusha. Now, this is a very important point that we should spend some time explaining or exploring. Just okay, so there's what's called foreign demons and native demons. Okay, our desire to eat too much comes from the native demons. Our desire to look at treif things on the internet comes from foreign demons. What's the philosophical, what's the limud from the koyach hamashicha? Gravity. What do you learn from gravity? I mean, there has to be something to learn from it, because it's like the most obvious koyach in the world. Everything sticks to the floor. Why? Because it's of the floor. Everything that comes from the aretz desires to go back to the aretz. That's what we learn from gravity. Everything gravitates to go home. Everything longs to go home. That's why the neshama is compared to a flame that wants to go up to Shemayim, whereas the goof is like a stone. It just wants to fall down and be more comfortable. So gravity is teaching us that everything longs to go home. Okay, and this is an issue for the Jew, because the Jew is composed of two opposite elements. He's composed of his human element, which is of the world, and he's composed of the nefesh elokis, the neshama that is of Shemayim. So the Yid is having a pull to go home that way and a pull to go home that way. He's a composite being. Remember, Jews, neshamas aren't Jewish. A neshama is a neshama. There's no such thing as a Jewish neshama. The neshama makes a human being Jewish. A human being with a neshama is called a Jew. But a neshama isn't Jewish. A neshama is just a neshama. There's no such thing as a non-Jewish neshama. A neshama is just a neshama. So everything longs to go home. So our lower part, and this is really the difference between the human element of the Yid and of the Goy. The difference is the difference between a kosher piece of steak and a treif piece of steak. What's the difference? Nothing. It looks the same, it tastes the same, it smells the same, it costs the same, everything's the same. You would not be able to tell the difference between a treif piece of meat and a kosher piece of meat. Unless it was chazir, if it was something like but the actual concept, yeah, you with me? That's the difference between our physicality. It's literally, for all intents and purposes, there's no actual how do you say it? Palpable, visible, there's a better word for it.
Tangible.
Tangible, thank you, perfect. There's no tangible difference between the Yiddish human element and the Goyish human element. So for us to in any way claim superiority is ridiculous. We are to say that we're more important is wrong. If it wasn't for the nations, there would be no world for us to serve. So who's more important, the teacher or the student? Who's more important, the pilot or the passenger? It's a silly question. We're all part of one big ecosystem. We have a role. We're the Kohanim of the world, and they are the, so to speak, the Yisraelim of the world in that Bechina. And our own nation, we have Kohanim and we have Yisraelim. And Alpi the Kohanim, they have the Kohen Gadol, and then so it's Bechinas and Bechinas and Bechinas. That's just how Hashem made the world. That's how it works. So there's no superiority here. We're just all part of the same. In fact, the minute somebody claims to be superior to anybody else on any side of the fence, that shows that their outlook is a Klipa Dika outlook. And they're looking at the world in a fragmented, unholistic way. When you look at the world in a holistic way, which is what we're striving to get to, you'll realize that there's no there's no higher and lower, or there's no more. There is higher and lower. There's no more choshev and less choshev. The whole thing is all part of one big klal, one big whole that everything needs to be in place. So the taiva from the Jewish human element is for things that are permissible, because that's where it comes from. The kosher piece of steak comes from klipas noiga. That's the world of permissible. So the taiva from the human Jewish element is to indulge in kosher meat, kosher relations, kosher whatever it is, kosher speech. That's the desire of the human element of the Jew. But you see, we have desires for treifa relations, we have desire for treifa food, we have a desire for treifa conversation. That comes from what's called the Shindolad and Nechuroyim, from the foreign demons. So how does it happen? That's because we have been in Gullus for so long. A textbook Jew, a factory installed Jew, fresh off the press, yeah, with factory default settings, yeah, will not have a problem with porn on the internet. A factory programmed, a factory default Jew will have an issue with eating too much, or with eating destructive kosher foods, or with not being sneers with his wife. Yeah, he will have an issue with that. But he will not have an issue with killing anyone. He will not have an issue with with eating anything treif. So why is it that we have these issues? Is it because we've picked up these Shindolad and Nechuroyim in the Gullus? So I've said this mashal to you guys a lot. I'm not sure to everyone, but I'll say it again. It's a very important mashal, so it's a chazara. The mashal of the sword. And it's such a chizuk to know, and this is really the chizuk. The chizuk is that if you're doing something that is asa, and you're addicted to something that's treif, it's foreign to you. And as such, you can get out of it very easily. even though it looks like the hardest, like I've been addicted to smoking for many years. Baruch Hashem, I haven't been addicted. I haven't smoked probably for, I smoked now in Purim. I haven't smoked for 11 years. I know all about addiction very well. And I know, just for example, when you're smoking, a smoker cannot imagine life without smoking cigarettes. He can't go there. He pasha can't go there. And that's the same with every addiction. Every addiction that you are, every addiction that a man is addicted to or anyone's addicted to, yeah, you can't imagine life without that addiction. Okay? But you have to know that if that thing that you are addicted to is asa, then it's very can't think of the right word. It's easy. It's easy to get out of. It might appear the opposite, but it is not native to you. It's not who you are. And as such, you can get out of it. Your mind might tell you that it's absolutely impossible to get out of it, but it's not impossible to get out of it. Whereas, for example, fixing your eating habits, yeah, that is difficult. That is genuinely difficult because that is coming from you. That's coming from who you are. That's not a inherited demon. That's a native demon eating badly and being with your wife correctly. Yeah, that's also that there's no heta just because she's your wife. There's no heta. The laws of sneers are probably more important with our wives. Not probably. The laws of sneers are more important with our wives in our bedrooms than in anywhere else there is. There's no heta for any behavior that isn't 100% sneers with our wives. Yeah. But again, that's difficult. But anything that's asa, that we can get out of. Because it's not us. And once we've gotten out of it, it doesn't have to come back. It really doesn't. The reason why we feel that it's impossible is all to do with up here. It's not a real connection. So the moshel is the moshel of the sword, like we said. A guy discovers an antique sword in the earth. And he pulls it out of the earth, and it's got these massive sods of mud stuck to it. So he takes a stone and he bangs off the big blocks of mud, and they just fall away like that. Yeah, now he's just got a dirty sword. So the next stage is you have to take a wet cloth and you have to clean it off. Yeah, which is a lot more work than banging off the big clods of mud, yeah. But you don't see as big a difference. The difference between the sword with the clods of mud and without the sods of mud is like the difference between a sword and a piece of mud. Now the next stage, it was much harder work, but the difference is now a dirty sword and a clean sword. Now the next stage after that is the sword is now tarnished. So you have to take out the Brillo pad with the hot soapy water and the gloves, and you're scouring it. Yeah, that's a lot of work, a lot of hard work, and the visual is not such a big difference at all. It was a stained sword, and now it's a clean sword. Okay, and then there's a sharpening, but we're not going to go there right now. But that's the whole Indian is the original avoider. Those big sods of mud, they came off with a Canuck from a sword. They came up with a Canuck from a rock. Fell off very easily, and the difference was huge. That's what we're talking about here. Is these things that we're involved in that are forbidden, they will fall away. They will fall away the minute you try to get them to. The minute you take control, they'll fall away. Unlike the more refined things that we spoke about, yeah, that's a much bigger avoider. But the Jew, the battle of the Jew is in what's permissible. See, we've been, it's been like a bait and switch, a switch and bait. What's it called? A bait and switch. Yeah, where we've now been fooled into thinking that we've got these forbidden things that we need to deal with. But the truth is the fight of the Jew is in the permissible. And it's foreign to us that our fight is in the forbidden. Okay? The fight of the Ummos Ha'olam is between the forbidden and the permissible. The textbook fight, the factory default fight of the Ummos Ha'olam is between the forbidden and the permissible. The factory installed fight, the Milchama of the Jew, is between the permissible and the holy. That's where our struggle is meant to be. And if our struggle isn't there, which it isn't for most of us, then take chizuk in knowing that it's a second nature. It's called a teva sheni, a second nature. And as such, you can always get back to your teva rishon. Just like everyone's seen on YouTube, these crazy Arabs in Dubai with these like lions and like crazy exotic cats, yeah? I would not go near one of those creatures. Because I don't care how tame a lion is, yeah? You know that it could just revert back to its, you've heard these stories with these bears and lions and stuff like that they just flipped and they reverted back to their Teva Rishon, because their Teva Rishon is to be a killer. It's only a Teva Sheni that they're drinking from a little, you see them drinking from these little bottles that babies drink from. that's called a Teva Sheni. So the chizuk is that the Teva Rishon is always just under the surface. So that's l'ra, but l'toiv by the yid, when we're involved in something that's asa, you should know that the real struggle is available to us just underneath the surface. Okay, that was worth talking about. Okay, mikol makom koidem shechazer lekadusha. Before this kedusha returns back to kedusha, who sitra achra v'klipa, it is absorbed and contained within the sitra achra and klipa. V'gam achakach. Now, what happens about once you've eaten not l'shem shemayim, you ate l'shem taiva for yourself, and now you turn around and you do tshuva. Listen, v'gam achakach hershimu mimenu nisha dabu beguf. It remains with the goof. There remains a reshima, what did you call it? An impression in the goof, an imprint in the goof, stuck, like infused within the goof. Because immediately, once you've eaten this food, it becomes part of your blood and flesh. It becomes you. So it leaves a reshima. And therefore, the body needs chibut akeva. We mentioned this last time. Yeah, chibut akeva. Lenakoisoi letaroi metumasoi shekibu behanas oilam hazer b'tanugav metumas klipas noiga v'shindorim yehudoyim. And from the pleasures that we indulged in our life, the reason why you indulge in pleasures is because you're important to yourself. Okay, that's not a chiddush. That's not a chiddush b'chlal. Because you're choshev to yourself, you indulge yourself in pleasures. Now that requires what's called chibut akeva, which is the beating in the grave. I don't know what that means. It doesn't sound very nice. Yeah, and I've seen some things on YouTube that are really not very nice. There was one guy made a video where you could like hear, like he put they put a microphone to a grave and they could hear like screaming and stuff. So I don't know, but that's called chibut akeva, and that comes from indulging in pleasures of this world that are permissible. They leave a residue in the goof that needs to be dealt with. Okay, yeah.
Maybe the banging of the sword to get the dirt off is like the same as chibut akeva.
Very good, very good. Shkoyach. V'achakach mi shlo nene So Ela Imkain Mishlo Nene Mo'ilam Hazeh Kol Yomav Rabbeinu Kodesh. Like Rabbeinu, like Rabbi Yehuda Nassim, the guy put up his little finger just before he was about to die. He said, "I never took any hana from this world Bechlal." Why? Because he was a tzaddik, and a tzaddik doesn't hold any cheshivas to himself, meaning he's not part of the equation. So if I'm not part of the equation, why would I be chasing after any pleasures of this world? It's not part of the equation. Yeah, I'm here to serve God. So he put his little pinky up he put up his pinky and said, I didn't take any pleasure from this world. And that's why we know that that we're told that the goof of the tzaddik doesn't deteriorate in the grave. It stays pristine, because the definition of the tzaddik is somebody who doesn't take any pleasures from this world, a shame pleasure. That's not part of his worldview. Okay, now gets the scary bit. The old divine batalim beheta. What about talking shtuyot that you're allowed to talk? We're not talking about lashon hara. We're talking about just shooting the breeze. Yeah. Kagon ama oretz she'en yachol lilmoid, that an ama oretz who's not able to learn tzarich l'tay nafshay metumazuk dekliba zu al gabe al yedei galgala b'kafa kela. He has to go through kafa kela. So an Amma Aretz who can't speak Torah, who's talking just shtuyot, nothing forbidden, not talking lashon hara or chilas or motzi shema, just talking shtuyot with his friend, yeah, he has to go through kafa kela. If you want to look that up. Okay, so number one, if you are not an Amma Aretz, you have no heta to not be speaking Torah. Sorry to be so stark, but you should constantly be turning the conversation into divrei Torah, divrei Yiras Shamayim, things that are toeles, helping a yid. It should all be mitzvah. Your mouth should not be used for something other than mitzvah. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand why you'd want to talk about anything else anyway. But you constantly need to be steering your conversation to mitzvah, whether it's actual Torah or, like we said, eitzes or helping or whatever. Yeah. What's the punishment for speaking shtuyot? It's called kafa kela. So out of all the crazy things I've heard, the best explanation I've heard for this was from a Shais Taub. He said kafa kela, which is described as being flung from one end of the world to the other end of the world, is like this. Imagine you're in, you don't really have to imagine this, everyone knows this. You're in a really deep tefillah. Something happened and you're mamash davening to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Everything else is dissolved, and it's just you and God, and you're really talking to Rebbeinu Shalom. Yeah, everyone's had this experience at least once or twice. Yeah, and as you're having this experience, the guy behind you is talking to the guy next to him about the baseball, and you're like, imagine what kind of frustration. You're there in front of the Rebbeinu Shalom talking to him, and you're hearing behind you, and you're like, shut up, leave me alone. Like, you like, another example is when you're it happens to me during Kriya Shema and like Birchas Kriya Shema and Birchas Kriya Shema all the time, where I'm in that matzav and the craziest, stupidest images come to my mind from like when I was 11 and 15 and 20, 20 years ago, for no reason whatsoever. They just pop up into my mind and I have to go shake my head and get them out of my head. It's so distracting. That's what Rav Shais Taub explained. The way I understood it was kafa kela, is you're in devekus otzum with the Rebbeinu Shalom. You're absolutely aware of Elokus and reality, and you're standing in front of God, and then all of a sudden there's a tap on your shoulder and someone's talking to you about the bank, and you're like, shut up, leave me alone. That's called getting flipped from one end of the world to the other, from one side of the world to the other side of the world. That's how Rav Shais Taub described kafa kela, and that makes a lot of sense to me anyway. So that's kafa kela, and that's for divine batalim. That's just talking shtuyot, not talking lashon hara, as he's going to say now. Aval the divine asurim kamoilate sonas for lashon hara kayotse, for things that are forbidden. Then she'ei mishlosh klipsa tameas legamrei that come from the Klipos Gamay. Ein Kafakel Levadamoil, Latah Lahavitu Masome Nefesh. Kafakela does not by itself help to scowl and scowl. Is that the word?
Scour.
Scour with an R, yeah?
There are.
To scour and to purify the soul. And that's those are very important words. Why? Because all punishment is purification. As we know, we don't need to go into that. Punishment is purification. Punishment is not vengeance. Hashem is not taking revenge on us. He's purifying us. So it's not enough. The purification process is not enough. Just kafakela. We need to, he says, leired legehenim. You have to go
Rabbi
back to,
Diamond.
huh?
So when you have this experience of those annoying thoughts or people talking about baseball, so that's really, if you makabel it, it's a purification. So it should be welcomed.
No.
I thought that's the point. We just said it's not, oynish is not just stam, it's a purification.
Yeah, but the thought itself is the purification. The fact that you just got distracted from the Rebbeinu Shlolem during, that's a tremendous oynish. That's a tremendous
oynish. But I'm saying if a person makabels it and realizes, wow, I just got purified, then he can go weiter.
Oh, okay. Okay. There's different ways. I didn't understand what you're saying. There's different ways of dealing with it. When you say like makabel it, I thought you meant like invite it in and like welcome it.
No, I mean that if it happened, if it came to you, okay, so then fine. Rather than be annoyed, you know, I just got a scouring.
Yeah, good. Okay, that's fine. But I think being annoyed by something like that is quite a holy annoyance. You know what I'm saying? But as long as you don't like to be annoyed when you're you know, davik to Hashem, not by a human being, then that's different. But by yourself, if something spits up into your mind that isn't kosher, I hear what you're saying. You could argue the other way though. I hear what you're saying. But definitely not to be makabel it. The goal is to, the Rebbe says later on, to push it away, b'shtei yadayim. He says to push it away. And if not, then daven to Hashem to take it away. But I hear what you're saying. Okay. V'chein, mi she'efshlo la'asok b'Torah v'oisek b'divayim b'teilim. What about a guy who could learn Torah and is involved in divine b'teilim? I think we should hold here because we've got after this it's going to talk about. I thought we'd get through the whole thing, but we didn't. But after this, the next he talks about the Aveira of Bittul Torah by itself, and then, which is a fascinating conversation, is he talks about learning secular wisdom, and it really is very fascinating. It gives you a very deep perspective on what happens when you're learning secular wisdom. So we'll leave that for next time. Okay, any questions? No, great.